I'm Tony Grace. It's Monday, August 4th. This is CTV News Channel. Great to have you with us across the country on this long weekend. Let's start by getting caught up with the latest on the trade war. So still no breakthrough right now on talks for a new Canada-U.S. trade deal this long weekend. But there are some new developments to share with the federal government's efforts to strengthen trade ties. Let's get right into it. CTV's Colton Praill joining us from Ottawa with the latest. Colton, 2 Canadian ministers off to Mexico tomorrow. What do we know about this trip?
Yeah, Tony, CTV News confirming this information just a few hours ago, but the Finance Minister, François-Philippe Champagne, as well as the Foreign Affairs Minister, Anand, will both be in Mexico City over the next 2 days. They're going to be there Tuesday, Wednesday. They'll have meetings, high-level meetings with their official counterparts. They're also expected to meet with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum. And sources tell CTV News that these meetings will be focused on trade, but also around the general relationship between these two countries. If you think back to 2024, even the early parts of this year, when there was that original Trump tariff threat, that relationship got a little bumpy. There were premiers, Doug Ford, as well as Danielle Smith, calling for Canada to try to move to a unilateral trade deal with the United States to cut Mexico out of it. That was not something that was well received by the Mexican government. Things have improved since then, as both nations have kind of been, in the mix and thrust with the same deal from the United States, or up until a few days ago, the same deal from the United States, and dealing with the brunt of these tariffs. And so since then, we have seen efforts from both sides to repair that relationship. Claudia Sheinbaum talking about working closer with Canada. Obviously, she was there at the G7, the two leaders having a bilateral meeting again, saying that they were going to focus on strengthening trade ties. We saw on Friday Mark Carney's commitment to the trilateral CUSMA deal in his statement about the increased U.S. tariffs. And this is the next step in this relationship. Obviously, also the phone call between the two leaders. But this is the next step. It's senior government officials heading down to Mexico City this week. And, while this isn't going to necessarily change much, it is an effort to improve relationships at a time where that's incredibly vital. The Canadian government is looking to strengthen its trading relationships. Mexico is our largest trading partner, but they only accounted for about 1% of exports in 2024. We're talking about $56 billion of goods and services that are going across both borders in a year. It's a lot, but it's nowhere near the $700 billion that's going through the U.S., or the $1 trillion, I should say, that's going cross borders with the U.S. on a daily basis. This is immense amount of trade. And so there really is an effort to work closer to home, deal with a country that has a higher GDP per capita than China, that's closer than China, who is our second largest trading partner as a single nation, and try to move things forward. At the same time, it's also a good idea to work on those relationships, especially as we are potentially looking at an upcoming review in 2026 of the free trade agreement with Mexico and the United States. We've seen the way that the U.S. has really pulled away from anything that's not a unilateral or bilateral agreement. And so if there is an effort to do so, and we haven't seen that yet from the United States, but if there is, it doesn't hurt to be on better grounds with Mexico in the midst of those talks.
Right, and Colton, of course, Mexico is a relatively geographically close neighbor, too, when you talk about the grand scheme of global trade. But quickly, I wanted to touch on the Canada-U.S. file, because, of course, in the last 24 hours, we've heard that Prime Minister Carney and U.S. President Trump are supposed to be touching base in the coming days. So I guess this could be a pretty busy week in terms of the type of movement we're seeing on overall trade talks here.
Absolutely. We know they're expected to talk over the next couple of days. Dominic LeBlanc said that yesterday in an interview. He also mentioned that he was going to have a phone call with Howard Lutnick sometime this week as well. Those conversations all still progressing, but it's also important to note that Minister LeBlanc mentioned that there was still, some ways to go to get to a place where a deal is possible. Now, everyone on the Canadian side has said they do believe there is a landing zone. They are optimistic that they can find that, but they're not necessarily in a rush to take a bad deal. And the tone from the federal government, while it has been consistent, is becoming more explicit, that their focus really is on looking elsewhere, on building up internally. You heard you've heard Mark Carney say repeatedly, on what we can control, but you heard Minister LeBlanc say this week, and it was a really crucial statement, that the next step for Canada is the economy, and that there will be a deal at the right time with the United States, but that next step really is the key caveat, and it's something that we're seeing the federal government be more and more explicit about. While we are in this limbo, past the last deadline, still without a trade deal, there really is a conscientious effort from the Canadian government to turn inwards and see what they can work on in the immediate term while also looking to find a trade deal with the United States.
Yeah, some shades of optimism we're hearing as we watch for what's happening next. Colton, Praill, appreciate you keeping track of everything for us this weekend, joining us from Ottawa. Colton, thanks so much.
Anytime.